one of my gumbo recipes. This topic has come up since we're in the month of late February, and actually I just saw a documentary on gumbo at the Pan-African Film Festival. Very interesting clip. I'll put a link on my on the site after this video is completed. But I wanted to share with you how to make real easy Louisiana style gumbo. Again, everyone's got their own technique. Everyone claims they make the best gumbo, or they know someone who makes the absolute best gumbo. But my style is simply this. Gumbo is an individual thing. It's based on what you like. And as long as you enjoy cooking, which I do, I'm not a chef, but I've been cooking for some time. And I learned the basics from my mother, who's from Texas, and she had to make Louisiana style dishes every night because my father is deep in the woods of Louisiana, and he would insist on that. So her gumbo was by far the best I've had. Then we've got other great gumbo makers in the family. I experiment a couple of times a year because, again, I enjoy the premise of cooking and just trying different items, getting off the beaten path, because gumbo is a very basic dish. It's really more of a soup. So you just put your own thing to it. Some people like it one way, some may like it another. You know, there is the Bible of gumbo, which is known as the Roux. But once you get past the Roux and put your ingredients in, that's more of an individual thing, at least based on my opinion. So I've got several Louisiana style cookbooks that I refer to every once in a while. But once you get the recipe down, you're off to the races on what you want. So today, let me move over here and show you what we're going to be working with. We're going to have our Holy Trinity, which is the celery, the bell pepper, the white onion, or the brown onion, and the garlic. And that's going to give me my Holy Trinity. And then as far as my roux, again, very basic, but this is where most people get intimidated about making gumbo, in my opinion. All you need is some flour, and you need some sort of fattening substance. So whether it's oil, or whether it's butter, or whether it's old-fashioned lard, or even some bacon grease like I've got here, you kind of do a 1-to-1 ratio and whip up a roux, which is like a gravy, and that's the base of your gumbo. So today I'm going to be experimenting just a bit. I'll be doing flour, just a tad of butter, and I'll do mostly lard, and then I'll do a little bit of baking drippings that I had from yesterday to give it a different taste. Now I'll be using my old-fashioned country black skillet that I got from my grandmother when I went to Louisiana in 1991 when she passed away. And this pot here has got to be well over 75 years old. I think in one of my other videos I made a mistake and said the pots I picked up were 100 years old, but that's not correct. More like 75 years, because she's passed away now at least 17 years, and she lived up to 89. But nevertheless, this is a good old-fashioned country black skillet that is perfect for southern style cooking. Then of course there's my ladle, there's my wooden spoon, and I'll be using a whisk to deal with my roux. Then I'll be topping the gumbo off with some basic parsley, and then I got some green onions. Again, these are optional based on your leisure, but what I try to do when I make my gumbo is have as much fresh products as possible to give it that real good, authentic Louisiana style taste. Now then we get into okra. I love okra, but some people just either they've had it and it wasn't prepared right, or for whatever the reason they have this thing in their mind about okra, and I don't know how in the world you can like gumbo but not like okra, because gumbo is a derivative from okra, and it comes from the western part of Africa, continent of Africa, from the Bantu culture. And as they came over to the United States, okra came with them, and it's a staple. So as long as you cook it right, you're good to go. I'll be dicing the okra down into bite-sized pieces, and it'll be going in nearly last, because again, the whole trick to okra is you do not want to overcook it. That's what creates the slime. But for gumbo, you're going to need a good okra, because that actually helps thicken the liquid to give you that real good creamy taste. And I'll be going with 4 different types of meat products. I've got about a pound of chicken that I found up in the freezer. Then I picked up some Pete's Louisiana sausage. Now, some people complain about Pete's. I love them because they're seasoned great. This is a Creole blend. They can be a bit greasy, but the whole trick is cooking them down before you put them in your gumbo. So I don't drop them in whole like some knuckleheads. You want to cook them down as much as possible, but not too hard. And then I've got some king crab legs that I'll be using. I use about a pound of king crab. And then I've got some good shrimp. And I'll be using about a pound of this. So all total, I have about 4 pounds of meat in my gumbo. And this is going to be a smaller serving because I'll be using my 8-quart pot here. And then as far as my seasonings, very basic. I've got some celery seed, some pepper, some gumbo filet, some Prudhon's Magic, some Tony Cacheret's Basic Creole seasoning, and then some thyme, some French thyme. And lastly, I'll be using some bay leaves. But that's basically it. So I'll be coming back and we'll work on the roux in just a second. But this is going to be a great gumbo. And I'll be making it my way. I don't care what anyone else says. And so if the recipe is appealing to you, I would encourage you to try whatever works for you and just experiment around. Most of my gumbo comes out pretty good, but once in a while I've had a batch that I was disappointed in, and that's because my technique was not up to the standard and I should have known better. But I'm going to try to take my time on this one so that I can help break the mystique if you're interested in making gumbo, so you can be encouraged and inspired to whip up your own batch. And again, I'll be popping this. I don't use this recipe here, but mine's is similar to this because, again, gumbo is a very basic dish. Once you get the basics down, everything falls in line. So it's not a lot of mystery of what you have to use. It's just seasoning, some meats, some okra, and the roux. And then I'll top that with a bed of rice and we're good to go. Okay, be right back. Okay, so I've started my roux. And the trick to a good roux is pretty basic. You need a good hot skillet. That's why I love the black skillet, because it retains heat more than any other utensil that I've used. So you can see I've got some butter, lard, and a little bit of bacon grease. And I'm going to render that down to yield me about a cup or so of liquid. And from there I'll be putting in my flour. And then we'll whisk that for about 30 minutes or so until it gets to the color that I'm looking for, which has to be a dark brown. So you gotta, when you're cooking gumbo, one of the tricks or the mandates is you need to stay in the kitchen. If you're not that kind of person, then I would leave gumbo alone, because it's the kind of dish that needs a lot of attention. It doesn't take that long. It takes about, from prep to finish to actually eating, maybe about an hour and a half, 2 hours. But the first 30 to 45 minutes is critical, especially as you're prepping your vegetables for your Trinity and then making your roux. Your roux is your most important step. If you get an F on the roux, then you're not going to be a good gumbo maker under any circumstance. Okay, another item that I use, I forgot to mention it in the earlier ingredient presentation, would be my free-range chicken broth. Now, some people use their own broth, or they make their own. This is going to be a seafood gumbo, so I could have boiled some of the crabs and some other the meats, but I prefer to put them in fresh. They'll be going in last. But you definitely want to have some broth, because this is what gives you your liquid. So I've got about 64 ounces for here, because again, I'm only going with 8 quarts, but I've got more if I need it. And also one other quick notation, the broth is necessary. You can, some people use water, but again, when you get into gumbo, it's what makes you happy. Don't get hung up on people who claim to be experts, because once you get the technique down, which hopefully this recipe will give you that confidence, you just simply do your own thing and make gumbo that pleases you. Alright, here's the Holy Trinity that's been chopped up and it's ready to go. Basically, I've got about a half a bell pepper, half a big white onion, there's some garlic on top, and some celery. And of course the celery is necessary. The garlic, some people don't use garlic, but I like to, because that actually gives the Holy Trinity the name. Otherwise, if you just use bell peppers, celery, and onions, what you've got is a Trinity. But I prefer to have the Holy Trinity and give the garlic, because it gives it this that nice kick, or that nice taste that I'm looking for. All right? Now here's the sausage I was telling you about. Again, I prefer Pete's Louisiana sausage. Some folk, they like andouille. I'm not a big andouille fan. Here in Los Angeles, I live in a Louisiana-based neighborhood, so I can get the products, and I prefer Pete's because of the taste, and it cooks very well, and it gives me what I'm looking for. And then real quick, that lard, butter, and bacon dripping combination that I was telling you about, I rendered it down, and lo and behold, don't know if you can see it, but I've got about a cup. So I'll be using this for my roux, and we'll get working on that in just a second. In the meantime, I'm going to finish off the sausage, and once these are nice and brown, I will put those to the side. Again, the reason I like to cook mine in advance, because these create a lot of oil or runoff from the cooking, and I don't want that in the gumbo, because otherwise I'm going to wind up with a greasy gumbo, and some people that's what they do, and they wind up skimming the oil off the top once the process is complete, but I don't do mine like that. Alright, there's the sausage, and it's just about ready to go. I've cooked it about 3/4 or so. I don't want it all the way cooked because it's going to cook in the gumbo, but it's a nice texture, real flavorful, and that'll give my gumbo the extra kick I'm looking for. Again, this is going to be a seafood gumbo with sausage, some chicken breasts, and I've got some lobster, crab legs, I'm sorry, and some jumbo shrimp. Alright, so now we're going to go with the roux. So this is pretty much ready to go, and I'll show you how quickly this can make. Alright, I've got my roux starting, and again, the whole trick to this is you've got to keep whisking or stirring. Depending on the pot you use, you can either use a wooden spoon, or in my case I can use a metal spatula because I'm using cast iron. But you can see the color now, it's kind of light. So I had to bring the temperature of that pot down because with a cast iron it heats up very quickly. So what this whisking does is it dissolves all the lumps and gives me a nice creamy texture that I'm looking for. And I've got to keep stirring so that it does not stick. But I've got to watch this like a hawk because I cannot afford to burn it. Once you burn it, you are done for that pot of gumbo. You got to start all over again. So we just keep stirring this. This is going to go for about 30 minutes or so, and I'll come back and you can see the color variation. But again, I've got this on medium heat, and I'm just going to keep stirring until I stir till I'm silly. Alright? Okay, the roux is going just fine. You can see the color's changing slightly. And again, I put this down to medium heat. Don't know if you can see that or not. But again, the thing about Southern cooking that I found over the years that I love, I just love the old-fashioned technique. So I try to use natural and original products, and I try to stay away from anything that's pre-prepared, or if it's just not fresh. And you can tell I like the old school stuff because my wife and I invested in this stove that we just love because it just reminds me of my childhood. Kind of the stove my great-grandmother had, and this is the stove that we tell our kids, we're not leaving you any money, but you'll have a stove worth a lot of value that is working in proper condition, and it puts out some great dishes. So I better stop talking and start stirring that roux because it looks like it's bubbling, and I simply cannot afford to burn it. Alright, roux time. So we're about 15, 16, 17 minutes in, and you can see how the color has shifted. It's a nice brown color. It'll go for another 15 minutes until it gets a little bit deeper texture. But what I wanted to show is, you know, the consistency. It's very smooth. Very smooth, doesn't stick. And this is just a base. All roux is a gravy. And this is just a base, but you got to have good roux. You got to have perfect roux for gumbo. Otherwise, as I mentioned, you are dead in the water, and the critics will have a field day on you. But my roux looks like it's coming along pretty good, and I do not expect this batch to be bad at all. So I'll check back with you in a couple of more minutes. I'm going to start dicing my okra because I've got some of the prep work to do. Once this roux is completed, I'll be sauteing my Trinity, and then we're off to the races. Alrighty, roux time. So this has been going for about a half an hour, and again I started with the high heat to get the oil, the butter, the lard, the butter, and the bacon grease at a nice temperature. And then I added in the white flour, just basic all-purpose flour, and I had to stir consistently. And what we've got now after about a half an hour is a real kind of Hershey chocolate looking color, very silky. So we're getting ready to put the Trinity in here. Some people put it straight into the pot, but I'm not going to do that because I want to use the heat from my country black skillet to do a lot of the cooking for me. Then I'll dump it in the pot and we'll bring it to a boil and let it simmer for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll be ready for serving. Alrighty, so my roux is pretty much where I want it to be, but I'm going to let it go for about another 5 minutes. Again, Creole cooking is very similar to Cajun cooking, from what I've been told. Cajun gumbo is actually a much darker, almost black, the black roux, whereas Creole is brown like this, and that's the kind that I'm used to eating, Creole style gumbo. So Creole style Louisiana based gumbo, very basic recipe. The biggest headache of making gumbo is just the time you need to be in the kitchen, and of course many think it's an expensive dish, which it could be, but mine's is a seafood gumbo, which drives up the cost. Seafood's rather expensive, and I wasn't able to pick up any Louisiana blue crab or Louisiana shrimp, but I've got some alternatives that'll do the trick, at least for as my taste. Alright, be right back. Okay, the roux went for about 35-40 minutes. I've added in the Trinity, and here's where you got to be real careful, because I don't want it to burn, because I've got this garlic in here, fresh garlic, and I'm just softening the Trinity up, and then I'm going to transfer it. But you can see how that heat just simply ate up those vegetables, and they're reducing very well, and it's getting very thick. So there you go. It's even getting darker in color, and that's just what you want. So I'll be right back, and I'm going to transfer my roux and my Trinity mixture into my cooking pot. Alright, let me give you a peek as to what we've done. So we've made our roux, we've sauteed our Trinity, we've placed our seasonings in, and this is what it looks like. It's more of a soup, and so I've got to let this go for about maybe 45 minutes or so. And then I'm going to put in some fresh items, because they don't need that long to cook. And I'm also thinking I'm going to put some tomato puree in here, because I like the taste of the tomato. Now some people don't like that, but again, this is my gumbo and this is what I do. But you can make yours any way that's to your pleasure. So there's my okra. I've chopped that up. That's about a pound of okra. I've got about 1.5 pounds of jumbo shrimp. And then this is 3 pounds of king crab, but I'm only going to use about maybe 1 pound, if not less, because this is my seafood gumbo. And keep in mind, I've got chicken in here, and I've also got some of those Louisiana sausage. So by the time this builds up, I put the chicken in because I want it to be nice and tender. And it's got a real nice texture to it. And I just let this cook, and then we'll be ready to go. I'll do some rice, some Texas long grain rice. I don't necessarily like Uncle Ben's or that other Mahatma. I prefer this Texas long grain that Judith and I found at Canton, which is down at the wholesale market. It's got a real good flake to it. And so that's what we like. All right, we'll be back. Gumbo is completed, and there you go. The consistency, the 4 meats that I put in there. There's crab, sausage, some shrimp, and then the chicken. And you can see the color of it. As a matter of fact, I was going to put some of my tomato puree in it because I like the taste that it gives, a little sweetness. But I have decided not to. And I'll show you why in just a second. Alright, so I sneaked some of the broth. And that's why I'm not going to put the tomato puree. It is outstanding. There's the rice that I made. Came out just the way I like it. Flaky, not mushy. You know, the liquid you could see. Again, it's creamy. It's not watery. And I put some parsley and some green peppers as garnish. And I normally put hot sauce on it, but as I mentioned to you, I saw the Gumbo movie at the film festival, and the Queen Dame, Leah Chase, mentioned how she admonished President Obama for putting hot sauce in his gumbo. So I'm going to have to change my bad habits, and I will not be putting I will not be putting hot sauce in this bowl of gumbo that is just outstanding. So I'm kind of pleased with the process. Hopefully this video gives you the motivation to do your own thing. As I say, I'm sure some will complain and criticize, you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right. And I just want to quickly point out, I did it the way I wanted to do it. And this is my version of gumbo. But it's a good process, simple process. Just, again, roux is your basic starter. You got to make good roux. If you make good roux, you're off to the races. Whichever ingredients you decide to put in it, that's your preference. Again, this is a seafood gumbo. Another thing I want to show you is you can see the okra that I put in. It's not slimy. If you do okra right, it's a heck of a dish. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't know who in their right mind can claim to be a gumbo aficionado, but they don't like okra, when okra is the genesis of the name gumbo. So, at any rate, that's my version. If you like the video, please leave comments. If you have any questions, shoot them to me. And otherwise, I do appreciate you taking time to watch the video. And hopefully, again, this will motivate you to do your own thing. And I'd like to see your posting when you make it available. So have a great Mardi Gras coming up. And we will see you in the next video.